let's get into some most likely All-Americans for Alabama in the 2024 season. You kind of look across this roster right now. I think there's some obvious candidates. I think people will look at quarterback. People will look at interior offensive line. Wide receiver, kind of a to be determined there. Running back, certainly talented. On defense, you look at the inside linebacker, maybe a secondary performer of note. And again, you can't keep me away from those specialists, Charlie. I'm going to look at one of those guys too. But for you, if you had one or two of these players that you could point to in that regard, which way you going?
No, I agree with what you said there at the end because I think the two that make the most sense. 'Cause I don't really like to load up on this because it sets unrealistic expectations. But I think Tyler Booker and Deontay Lawson seem like slam dunks right now. But for me, it's James Burnip at punter, man. I knew that you would love that pick. Talking with Will Riker down the Senior Bowl, man, that guy loves him some James Burnip, and not only just who he is as a close friend of Will, but just the way that he's developed as a player. And you look at him this past season, I think he finished 5th in the nation in punting average. He has progressively gotten better and better. I think he's gotten more and more confident. Heck, my man was at Outback again last night, so he's really starting to get cultured here in America. But I do think that James is in for another big season. And with, Alabama's got some guys returning on offense, but a big weapon for a first-year head coach breaking in a new offense is a hell of a punter. That can't be understated. So if he can continue to be on the trajectory he's been on over the course of his career, yeah, I think James Burnip's a guy that could be on All-America watch at the end of the season.
Yeah, James Burnip also turned out to be a damn good holder. So I'm sure Will appreciated that. You go back to the Auburn game, I think it was actually the 2021 game, right? You replaced Paul Tyson in game with James Burnip. And from that point forward, it was Burnip. And Will didn't miss many kicks, if you notice, after that point moving forward. But Burnip, you think about really, I guess it was his last punt of the 2023 season and what could have been with that muff by the Michigan return man there inside the UM10. It looked like Kendrick Law was going to force a fumble. Boy, how much could that have changed things? I'll stop. I'll just stop now. Clint, who do you have for us?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go bold a little bit originally and maybe go with like a Justice Haynes. But then you start looking at like the DeBoer offense, and anytime you've seen like, okay, Washington last year, a lot of pass attempts, but it still had that complementary presence as far as a running back. I mean, 1,200-yard rusher, 16 touchdowns from Dylan Johnson. That's extremely impressive. But when you look at, it took him getting over a 70% workload as far as running back carries in order for him to put up those numbers. And when you look at like Najee Harris, who was in a predominantly I wouldn't say pass first necessarily, but pass happy offense under Steve Sarkisian in 2020, it took him getting 60 to 65% of the workload for him to have 1,500 yards and 20 plus touchdowns. So, you look at Justice Haynes, and I think by the end of the year, he'll probably, if I had to predict it right now, he'll probably have a slightly higher workload than maybe a Jam Miller, but they're going to be so 1A and 1B. I wouldn't be shocked if they're both in like that 800-yard range, and 8 or 9 touchdowns or maybe 10 touchdowns apiece or something like that. But even if that happens, I don't think that's enough to get either one of them to All-American status. So I kind of got off that quick. Tyler Booker makes a ton of sense on the offensive line, assuming that he's going to make that transition to the new scheme, which I fully anticipate that he's going to be able to. I think defensively, Deontay Lawson makes a lot of sense. I also think Jahad Campbell, like Lawson has missed time due to injuries really the last couple of years. Yeah. And so, a guy like Jahad Campbell, who I think is only continuing to get better and better, and with his versatility in this new defense, this, swarm defense, I think he can end up putting up some monster numbers as well. And if he has to be like the primary, guy, I due to injury with Lawson, I think he could end up serving very well in that role. And one other thing I want to point out is that Womack's defense doesn't go dime a ton. So 2 linebackers are going to be on the field, probably even more. I know it's going to be more than what you saw under Nick Saban and any of those other defensive coordinators. So Jahad Campbell would also be a guy who I would consider. And then, a guy like Tim Keenan, if he can get that Jordan Davis kind of love, where maybe he's not stuffing the stat box too much, but he's controlling the line of scrimmage. He does have some penetrative traits. And I think in this new defense, he will be able to put up a little bit better numbers than we saw, last year. And if he can do that and continue to control the line of scrimmage, do well stopping the run, I think he can end up having a really good season and could be in that All-American conversation.
Yeah, in doing a little research of just say Washington's defense the last couple of years and even USA's, you don't see a lot of defensive tackle types, as you said, stuffing the stat sheet. So your point is a good one in terms of a Tim Keenan or, one of the other defensive linemen, Tim Smith coming back, putting up those kind of all-American type numbers. I think Burnup is a slam dunk option, as Charlie pointed out. I'll tell you one guy Alabama fans are hoping will be an All-American. That's Parker Brailsford, right? At the center position.
Good point.
And you think about it, when you think about individual award watch list season, which is going to be here before you know it, right, Charlie? Those lists will be coming if they're not already cranking up. I think Parker Brailsford, you talk about the Remington Award. I'll be surprised if he isn't right there, if he stays healthy at the end of the upcoming season. So there you go, some All-American candidates for this Alabama team.